Great to meet you, Dr. Bredesen.
Great to meet you, Barrett.
Yeah. Just for our listeners that are unfamiliar with your work, I just wanted to go over really quick. You are, to make sure that I have this right too, you're a neurologist who earned your MD from Duke University, correct?
Yes.
And then you wrote The End of Alzheimer's, which was a New York Times bestseller, and you've done over 30 years of research on Alzheimer's, correct?
Yes, we studied the fundamental nature of the neurodegenerative process and the molecular biology of that. What are the molecular species driving this problem?
Right. So I just finished your new book, which I enjoyed very much.
Thanks.
And in there, I saw the incredible statistic that none of the people that are on your prevention protocol, the pre-code protocol, have developed dementia. Is that correct?
Yeah. So here's the way this works. So, there are four, when you're developing cognitive decline associated with Alzheimer's, which unfortunately, 45 million Americans will develop if we don't get on the right prevention protocols, then you go through those four phases. So there's an asymptomatic phase, SCI, which lasts about 10 years, subjective cognitive impairment, MCI, and dementia. So as you said, for those people who start when they are asymptomatic, it's truly a prevention program, and they do the recommended things, improve their insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammatory issues, things like that, identify various infections. There's not a single example of someone who's gone then on all the way to dementia. Now, maybe someday we'll see one, but that this just tells us all, start early.
Right. So one of the things that I noticed when I started reading the book is I had some misconceptions about cognitive decline. And can you tell us some of the most common misconceptions that you run into?
Yeah, absolutely. So the common ones are things like, there's nothing I can do about it. In fact, unfortunately, standard of care websites for years and years and years, and some still have it, it says there is nothing that will delay, prevent, or reverse cognitive decline. So if you're going to get it, you're going to get it. That's the most common and the worst misconception because, of course, people wait and wait and wait and wait. And then another common misconception is, it really doesn't matter what I do. I just have to take a pill or I have to take an injection. And it turned out, as you know, the trials for various monotherapies, be they pills or injections, have not shown improvement and certainly not sustained improvement. So this ultimately, as you know, this is a network insufficiency. This is what we studied in the lab for so many years. There are dozens and dozens of contributors. So it's just like if you brought your car in and it was low on oil and low on gas and needed a new battery and, had all these sorts of things and just was not doing well. The idea of just saying, well, if we fill up with gas, is that good enough? Or if we just fix the transmission, is that good enough? That doesn't make sense. This is a network and you've got to look at all the players and you've got to address those players. And when you do that, that's when you get the best results. And as you know, we just published recently people who have done very well for 10 years and more, where they improved, they sustained their improvement. And in fact, patient 0, the very first person where we reversed her cognitive decline, which was 2012, is now 81 years old, 13 years into this.
Wow. She's
doing great, and she's walking across the United States from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. She started in April,
wow.
And she's now in Florida. And she's going to be hitting the Atlantic coast on November 15th. And you can see her on judywalks.org. So if you go to judywalks.org, you'll see Judy.
Incredible.
She's amazing.
One of the misconceptions that I didn't know that you could still reverse cognitive decline is when you have even genetics that may be a predisposition towards cognitive decline. Is that true?
Absolutely. And so about 2/3 of the patients with Alzheimer's have ApoE4. And so this is a common genetic risk factor, the most common genetic and most important genetic risk factor in Alzheimer's. 75 million Americans have single copy and 7 million Americans have 2 copies, are homozygous for it. If you have 0 copies, and that's 3/4 of the population, your chance of developing Alzheimer's during your lifetime, it's about 9%. It's not 0, but it's not very high. You have a single copy, it's about 30%. And if you have 2 copies, and by the way, single copy, that's 75 million, as I mentioned. If you have 2 copies, it's about 90%, unfortunately. And so the good news is the vast majority of Alzheimer's, about 95%, doesn't have other of these determinant genes, which are the three, APP, PS1, PS2. Those are uncommon causes of Alzheimer's. For 95% of us, the issue is this proclivity, which is generated by ApoE4. And then it's, of course, the things that we're exposed to. It's the various toxins we're exposed to. It's the various inflammagens we're exposed to. It's the reduction in energetics that we get. And that's the whole point of this book, The Ageless Brain, is to have it so all of us have a brain span that is long as our lifespan. Because so many people will live to 88, 90, but their brains only work well till about 70 or 75. That's a huge problem. And of course, that's filling up nursing homes and all that sort of stuff. So we can do much, much better. At this point, as I mentioned in the book, Alzheimer's is rapidly becoming optional. We don't have to wait for it to happen. There's so much we can all do to make sure that we don't develop dementia.
In the book, you compare treating Alzheimer's to fixing a roof with 36 holes because you've identified 36 factors that can trigger decline. For people that aren't familiar, can you explain a little bit about treating these factors in your prevention and your recode programs?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, they really boil down into three major groups. And that is anything that reduces energetics. So sleep apnea being a common one, reduced blood flow, vascular disease, mitochondrial dysfunction, any of these things that are going to reduce the energetic support for the brain. The second big group is inflammagens. So anything, whether it's mycotoxins, whether it's changes in the oral microbiome with P. gingivalis, very common, whether it's the gut leakiness, which is, again, so common. Whether it's metabolic syndrome, about 100 million Americans have metabolic syndrome, and that about triples your risk for cognitive decline. So all of these things are critical. Then the third big group is toxins, and they come in three groups, the toxins themselves. It's the inorganics, like air pollution and mercury. It's the organics, things like toluene and benzene. And by the way, microplastics have turned out to be an issue. And then things like anesthetic agents. That definitely is another one. And then third group is biotoxins, things like trichothecenes, ochratoxin A, that many of us are exposed to, often without realizing it, because we are living or working in areas where there are specific species of molds that will produce these toxins. So those are the big three group. The intermediate three group, those are some reduction in neurotrophic activity, BDNF, NGF, hormones, nutrients, and then some reduction in neurotransmitters, things like acetylcholine, which is critical for memory formation and is reduced in people with Alzheimer's. And then interestingly, the final one is stress. And as a scientist in the lab for all those years, I never thought that stress was going to be a big issue. I thought, come on, we're all under stress, so what? And it's not the acute stress with resolution. That's really, we're meant to handle that. It's the chronic, unremitting stress that's really been a problem. And there's no question, it does impact the same pathways that Alzheimer's impacts. So those are the things. And the great news is we can measure all these. We can look for the drivers. Everybody can get on active prevention. We have a program called Precode for prevention of cognitive decline and a program called Recode for reversal of cognitive decline. Now, as you know, for the first time, there are blood-based biomarkers. So I just got mine checked recently. Everybody should know their p-tau 217. Just like if you know your cholesterol and your blood pressure, you should know your p-tau 217. We've worked with actually the group that has the most sensitive test for this, and this is called Neurocode. So we have a test called Brain Scan. So you can do getabrainscan.com or you can contact Neurocode, either way. Find out where you stand with your p-tau 217. And if it's high, don't worry. It's like finding that your hemoglobin A1C is too high. Okay, you want to find that out before you have full-on diabetes and have retinal damage and kidney damage and vascular damage. The great news is we can see this coming now for years ahead of time, and we can make sure that we never have full-on Alzheimer-related dementia. And that's a fundamental change and should, give a lot of people a good feeling that, hey, this is not the boogeyman anymore. This is not the sort of thing in my generation. And I'm now in my mid 70s. In my generation, that was the biggest concern we had. We were going to get Alzheimer's out of the blue. Nobody knew. Nobody was going to tell you how to prevent it or how to look for it early. And then we were going to have it and there's nothing you can do. Those days are over.
It's really good news because, your message, needs to be spread as much as possible because I know so many people who don't think that there's anything they can do about any cognitive decline, including people in my own family. There was a few factors that I found surprising in the book, chronic inflammation and some different things like insulin resistance, periodontal infections, and mold. Those I always knew that they were bad for your health. I had no idea that they could be ticking time bombs for Alzheimer's and other, cognitive decline. That was very surprising to me.
Yeah, it's a great point. One of the things when you look in the brain of Alzheimer's, what do you see? You see this amyloid, which people have vilified and said, oh, the amyloid's causing the Alzheimer's. Well, in fact, the amyloid turns out to be an antimicrobial peptide. And actually, Professor Rudy Tanzi and Professor Robert Moyer from Harvard several years ago showed that this is an antimicrobial peptide. Okay, this really tells us a lot about the disease. You are defending your brain from these various insults. And of course, now we know there's actually a brain microbiome. Of course, when I was training many years ago, the brain was thought to be a sterile organ. Of course, you don't have bacteria there. Well, it turns out that, in fact, you do. And where do they come from? Most of them are actually coming from the oral microbiome. So as you said, if you've got periodontitis, if you've got things like P. gingivalis, T. denticola, Prevotella intermedia, these F. nucleatum, these sorts of things, these are all concerns for increasing risk for cognitive decline. These can get into your brain. And what do you do in response? You make amyloid. So what we see as Alzheimer's disease is the brain trying to protect itself from these various insults. And it's a little, amyloid is a little bit like a long-acting cytokine. It is there to kill these microbes. And interesting, what it does is it surrounds, isolates, and inactivates these various mold species and herpes simplex, viral species, and bacterial species, spirochetal species, all of these things. So that's why you're making this stuff.
Before I worked for KAATSU a few years ago, I had heard about your book, The End of Alzheimer's. Didn't get around to reading it, but I had heard about your work before and was very interested in hearing more, heard about it in podcasts. But since, I've been working with KAATSU, we have a lot of your patients reach out to us. And there's a section about KAATSU in your book. What has been your patient experience with KAATSU?
Yeah. And so, we got interested in this several years ago because, again, there's this beautiful balance, supply and demand. And as we get a little older, the supply is going down. The hormones aren't what they were and the nutrients may not be what they were and the energetics may not be as supportive. And all these things are going down and the demand is going up because now we have these insults. You've got the bacteria from your mouth that are getting in there. They're triggering this production of the amyloid. And the amyloid is it's surrounding these things, but it's also causing you to now downsize a little. It's basically like if you have your country and it's being attacked, you're pulling back and you're saying, okay, we're going to put out the troops here, but we're also going to live in a smaller space. So we got to find these and we got to improve these. And so anything we can do to improve that supply side and KAATSU, so that, exercise is critical. It's an important part of this. And I like KAATSU because it's giving you more bang for your buck. For one thing, I like it because, of course, nobody's paying me from KAATSU to say that I like KAATSU. I like KAATSU. We started to use it because it is giving you, for example, if you're a little older, you've got issues with your joints. So maybe you're going to harm yourself, or maybe you've got some arthritis. So it's actually gives you more bang for your energetic buck. It's also going to help you increase your PGC1 alpha. So it's now going to give you that better burst. It's going to help you with your insulin resistance. You're going to build more muscle. So that's going to help you be more insulin sensitive. So, we're always looking for, hey, this is a terminal illness. If you don't do the right things, and I always teach, we've taught over 2,000 physicians in 10 different countries and all over the US, and I always tell them, when someone comes to you with cognitive decline, and of course, I hope more and more will come pre-cognitive decline to get on prevention, but when someone comes with cognitive decline, only one of two things will happen. Either you will find what's causing it and you'll help them and they'll reverse it, which we see all the time. In our trial, it was 84% of people improved, or they will die. This is a terminal illness. So we're really serious about, we want to do anything possible to help you. And KAATSU, I also like EWOT, by the way, exercise with oxygen therapy, because it's giving you the blood flow and it's giving you the oxygenation. Of course, HIIT is another one that has worked for many people, but you have to be a little bit careful, of course, for people who've got some cardiovascular disease. The bottom line is the armamentarium for preventing and reversing cognitive decline, which I was taught was zero, nothing you can do, is massive and growing. It's KAATSU. It's the ability to deal with changes in oral microbiome. It's EWOT. It is things like a plant-rich, mildly ketogenic diet. It's identifying and killing the various microbes. It's optimizing your oral microbiome. I mean, it is huge and it's growing. And we've got all sorts of wonderful medications and supplements. BHRT is another one. The bottom line is you can look at this as a personalized approach. For each person, you're asking what's driving this or what's driving the risk, and then you are attacking those things. And we've got, the best results that have ever been seen. We've got a new trial that's finishing October 31st. And we've already, because we've got 95% of the cognitive data in already, we've just got one or two more people finishing up this month. So we've already looked at this, and we've looked at it for the effect size. How big is the impact of what we're doing with these personalized precision medicine programs? And the answer is larger than any other previous trial. And in fact, it's about 6.5 times the effect size of lecanemab, which was the so-called breakthrough drug that people use, the monoclonal antibody that people inject. And that's without the side effects of lecanemab. So this is a new era. There is so much that can be done, and everybody should protect their brain health. Get evaluated. If you're 35 or over, get your brain scan, this is a simple blood test. I had it done at my kitchen table, and I'll, redo it in 2 years. If you're under 60, just do it every 5 years. You don't have to look at it a lot. Every 5 years, just check to make sure you're okay. And if it's abnormal, don't worry. Get on an optimal program, work with a well-trained physician. At these early stages, everybody improves.
To finish up, that's what I was going to ask you, is for our listeners and followers, other than reading The Ageless Brain, which I really enjoyed a lot, what are some of the next steps that they can take? The Apollo Health site, does it have cognition tests? What is the next step for people that want to have better health?
Great point. And the next step is very simple. Go on to mycqtest.com. So mycqtest is a simple, free online assessment of your cognition, because as you know, this sneaks up on us. People will say, well, I think I'm okay, but I think I'm just getting a little older. And the doctors, unfortunately, we often tell patients, well, you're just getting a little older, when in fact, there's so much that can be done. So we had, as an example, and I mentioned this in the book, a woman who came in and said, well, it's in my family. I think I'm probably okay, but I'm feeling like I'm just getting a little bit older. She was only in her 40s. And as I also mentioned in the book, the greatest increases in terms of year over year have been in the 30-somethings and 40-somethings. So this disease that we used to think of as old-timers disease is really a disease of your 20s, 30s, 40s. People have even found changes in the 20s now. That's manifesting as dementia in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So you've got this ongoing fighting of this for years. It's a little bit like developing periodontitis. Again, for a long time you can do fairly well, but ultimately it's going to really be a problem. So get in early and make sure that you're okay. So this woman came in and said, I think I'm probably okay. Well, so we checked her. She scored a 23 out of 30 on her MoCA. So she was already well into the third phase, which is MCI. She did great. She got in the program. Her MOCA came up to a perfect 30. And so, it does sneak up on you. And so everybody should get evaluated. And starting, very easily, just go on to mycqtest.com, get a free CQ test, see if you're doing well or if you're doing not so well. And don't worry about it because, again, just like diabetes, you can see it coming now for years and years and years.
For people that want to see your website, it's Apollo Health. Is that?
You can go either to drbredesen.com. That's an easy way to go, and that'll get you in there. You can also go to Apollo Health Co. ApolloHealthCO.com. And I've been working with the Apollo group. This is some guys from Apple, fantastic group, Lance Kelly and Sho Okada and Bill Lip and the whole gang there. Because we need, as in healthcare, we need to increase our data set size. This idea of we're just going to look at 2 or 3 blood tests is crazy. And obviously there's a huge amount of biohacking these days. What we really want to do is assisted biohacking. We want to help you to get the optimal outcomes. And we have, as I mentioned, so far we have the best results in the world. So you want to find out where you stand. The brain scan part is telling you where you stand. Then the so-called RECODE labs, these are, again, some simple labs you can do that aren't typically being done in mainstream medicine, will tell you where you're headed. So those two together are very powerful to look to see, okay, let's make sure that you never develop full-on dementia.
Dr. Bredesen, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for having the conversation. Thanks for writing the book. Yeah, I love the book.
Barrett.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you guys do with KAATSU. It's helping a lot of people. And it's, it is a part of getting people to optimize their cognition. Anything we can do against this horrible illness and for just improving cognition for all, which this book also discusses. We can all do better with our cognition. We can all optimize. So appreciate what you guys do with KAATSU.